In this video of Chapter 17, Section 2, we're going to talk about trade barriers and agreements. This is huge when it comes to macroeconomics because this is identifying how countries trade with one another, what happens when trades are broken, and how is trade also used as a tactic to grow the economy. So we're going to look at the arguments for and against trade barriers and agreements. A trade barrier is nothing more than a agreement or a barrier to allow someone to trade with that company. So preventing a foreign product or service from freely entering a nation's territory. So for instance, in the United States, we don't do trade with North Korea. North Korea doesn't do trade with us. We have a trade barrier. We're not going to, at this point in time, we're not going to agree to what their terms are, and they don't want what we have. So we have a trade barrier. We're just preventing, we're not going to do trade with that country. And so other ways to do trade barriers, sometimes there's a tariff known as a tax on imported goods. So any product that's brought into the United States generally has a tariff on it, a tax. And we'll talk about how that tax is used to make competition in the U.S. a lot more even. Import quotas is another trade barrier, setting the limit on how much a country can import to a country. And there's something called VER, which is voluntary export restraint. And what that means, sometimes countries will purposely follow their own restriction when it comes to bringing in products into a different country. One, the reason why they don't want to burn the relationship. Second, they don't want to run out for their own country. And third, they don't want to have an over surplus. In the chapter, we talk about monopolies where they provided too much. If there's a monopoly and you're the only one providing it, they want to limit that to increase the price. Other barriers that are out there are referring to licensing and regulations, and there's sanctions and embargoes. So let's go through these quickly here. A license to do business within a different country. This could be a very high fee. This could slow down the licensing process if we have to do all this paperwork for a different country. And then environmental regulations, health and safety. We have in the U.S. some of the strictest health, safety, and environment regulations on the planet. So for foreign countries to come here to start a company or to manufacture something, they have to agree to what we have in our standards. And then there's something called a sanction. And then what it says here, a nation takes in order to punish or put pressure on another nation. So if there is a country that is invading or bullying or taking advantage of another country who is not as successful or doesn't have a great military, other countries can throw sanctions on that country who's threatening the weaker country. And so we will not trade with you. We will have a no-fly zone all around you so that countries have to go around our countries if they're going to fly, which if you have enough countries agree to it, then you have like a whole barrier where they can't fly through that zone. And then there's something called an embargo. This is a complete trade with no particular country, meaning that if North Korea continues to, at this time the video being filmed, to work on their nuclear weapons, we can put an embargo, which I think we've done, an embargo on them, meaning we will not trade with that country whatsoever. And the whole idea is to influence that country to either engage in an activity they need to or stop engaging in something else. What we find here is the effects of the trade barriers. So in order to try to make trade more fair for the domestic companies, meaning that the companies that are within that country, what we can do is have a tariff on there. So if you look at this example here, we have, let's say, a foreign vehicle would be able to make their car and do everything for $20,000. By the time it's over here, they can put $20,000. Well, let's say the American company can do the same similar car, but it's going to cost them $21,000 rather than the competition foreign countries $20,000. So what happens is that countries will put tariffs on one another to make competition more possible for the companies that are within that country. So if we put a 10% tariff on cars and it's a $20,000 car, well, that's a $2,000 tax. And so you see, now they have to offer the car at $22,000, and the US company can offer for $21,000. So you can see it trying to level the playing field of competition. Other effects, what happens? Oftentimes when you have a increase in tariff of a different country, you have a trade war that will begin. And we saw this not all that long ago when it came with China. And one of the major things that they were putting higher increasing tariffs was dealing with steel. And steel was a huge part of the economy of different countries, especially China. So by putting a dramatic increase of tariff on them, that responded China to come back and say, no, we're going to put tariffs on your other products. So I believe pork is a big one when it comes to the U.S. importing that into other countries. And I think China is one of those that receives it. And so they put big tariffs on it, which had an impact on our farmers. And in the state of Minnesota, there was even being felt here with our hog farmers as well, because now they wouldn't be able to compete with the same prices, and the profit margins they were making already were so low that it made it more difficult. We've also had trade wars during the Great Depression, the Smoot-Hawley Act, and then we've had steel wars in the past as well. Now, what are the arguments for these trade barriers? Well, the argument one is to protect jobs. If we don't have these tariffs, if we don't have sanctions, if we don't have embargoes, it's a possibility of losing jobs. So protectionism is the whole idea to shield domestic industries from foreign competition. So when President Trump made the decision to increase the tariff on steel, his approach was to make the competition more sided for our domestic USA steel companies, allowing them to be able to compete better in the marketplace and having US companies buy from US companies rather than importing steel from China. So the idea is to protect jobs. The second one argument is to protect infant industries. So when it comes to certain industries that maybe a country is lacking in or they like to be a part of, what they can do is put high tariffs or sanctions or something on those in order to allow these industries that we wish we had within the country border being created and giving them a time frame. Now, the problem with this, though, in infant industries, when you have a time frame, and with all of us, there's a lack of incentive. If we know we have the next 20 years to develop a electric car, and we already know that, let's say, Canada figured out to make it for very cheap, well, they'll put very high tariffs on Canada for a long time. But during that 20-year period, only the consumers having to pay more because there's not enough incentive anymore for these industries here. It's difficult to remove. What happens to those infant industries if they're not ready at the end of the 20 years? And then increasing cost to the consumer. If electric vehicle can make a third of the cost in Canada versus Canada and the US, that only hurts the consumers because now we have to spend more even though a product across the border is a lot cheaper. The third argument is safeguarding the national security. And this is why our US farms receive so many subsidies, meaning money, to protect essential industries. So the whole idea is that if we ever go into a war situation, that we trade very heavily with a different country and we need that essential thing. Well, what takes place then is that we would not be able to compete in war as much as we possibly could because we need that product. But if we safeguard industries here, like the steel industry, to be able to give them subsidies and give them money to continue to stay in business, well, then we won't have that problem. The argument is, though, what is considered essential? What is really essential when it comes to this? And that's why it's a pretty hard argument when it comes to farmers and other industries that they should receive subsidies, but at the same time, how much should they receive? Now, trade agreements. Instead of fighting and arguing and trying to be self-sufficient, if you remember all the way back to an early chapter, we talked about self-sufficiency. Well, there's something called specialization. Why not have countries that are really good at doing particular things, focus on those areas, be able to trade those products and services at a reduced rate? That would include dropping the price for the consumer. So that's why we have a lot of free trades that are out there, limiting the trade barriers and trying to make it where everyone wins. In this one, 1934, we had the Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act in 1934. The whole idea behind this was that in order to try to stabilize the economy, FDR and his team put in place very high tariffs on other countries in order to bring in some more money to get us out of the Great Depression. The problem was we weren't the only country that was going through this, and the other countries retaliated, saying that they wanted to put tariffs on us. As a result, 1934 passed. We just set things back in motion and reduced the tariffs again. We have other status of countries as an MFN, most favored nations. There are certain countries that the U.S. likes to trade with, and some they do not. And then we have GATT, which you can read there, reduce tariffs and stabilize world trade, trying to increase trade. We have, not the U.S., but there's an organization called the WTO, whose job is to regulate trades across different nations, and in a sense, they're a referee to make sure that things are done correctly. And some famous cases, what we'll look at later, was the beef wars and the steel tariffs that took place. And again, it's the World Trade Organization to try to make sure that everyone's following the rules and try to increase trade as much as possible. My video has been frozen here, but we're going to continue on. Now, European Union. What we see with the EU and what they have done to try to increase trade has been trying to unite different countries. And some of those countries in Europe, of 28 members there, what they have agreed to is to have a single currency known as a euro. So if you ever travel to Europe and travel through these different countries, they don't have their own currency anymore. It is the euro. Most recently, the country that's trying to leave the European Union is Great Britain. They're trying to get out. They don't think it's beneficial for that country, so they're trying to remove themselves from this, which has been a huge ordeal for the country. In the U.S., North America, we have something called NAFTA. And the whole idea is North American free trade, allowing free trade between U.S., Canada, and Mexico. 1993 is passed by President Bush Sr., and it wasn't until recently that President Trump revised it, replanned it, and made it more where the United States can now have more advantages instead of being taken advantage when it came to this agreement. Some say this agreement was terrible for trade because it gave a lot more business to Canada and Mexico, and the U.S. kind of got stuck. And now the new one has definitely improved the U.S. situation. There's some other regional trade agreements that are across the planet as well. And the role of multinationals plays a huge part in all this. If you remember from Chapter 8, we had sole proprietor, franchise, partnership, corporations, and then a multinational. Multinational is a large corp, can sell their products across the world. And benefit is definitely some cheaper costs and more jobs. The con side of this is that it brings in political power and domestic strain. So for instance, if the U.S. was to go make a trade agreement with North Korea and establish some manufacturing plants over there and to bring our culture of the Western culture, there's going to be definitely some influence there. And domestic strain as well. Making sure that paying the employees and the business model and all that is done correctly and ethically and following the rules that are out there. This is the end of Chapter 17, Section 2.